So let's talk about vitamin E and why it's important. You probably hear about vitamin E quite a bit when you see skincare or certain foods out there might have a vitamin E label on it. So what's the deal with vitamin E? Why should we care? Why is it important? I'm going to tell you that and more on this episode. Hi, I'm Brandy, your gut health expert, here to talk to you about vitamin E today. So, vitamin E is an essential vitamin. What that means is that your body actually requires vitamin E for normal daily function and life. And the other thing about an essential vitamin is our bodies cannot produce it on its own. It's not something that we can synthesize on our own and just make. So, that means you have to get all of your vitamin E from food or supplementation. Now I'm going to explain to you the difference between the two of those in just a bit, but it's important first to know that vitamin E is essential. You have to have it. Our body only has such a degree of storage capacity for vitamin E, which means we have to be constantly consuming it on a daily basis so that we have it available in our bodies for the functions that it's needed for. Typically what happens when we are deficient in vitamin E is that our central nervous system begins to shut down. So think of things like Alzheimer, dementia, neuromuscular issues where your body or your muscles aren't quite functioning the same way that they're supposed to. Maybe you can't grab a cup like you used to be able to. You've lost some motor skills, things like that. So those are the things that can happen when we're in a vitamin E deficiency. So vitamin E deficiency is fairly rare these days. It was a lot more prevalent in the early 1900s when we were having scarcity of food and a lot of different substances weren't available as readily as they used to be. So we were seeing a lot of vitamin-related diseases. We don't really see that anymore today, and there's a reason for that. And one of those reasons is fortification. So what that means is if you go to the market and you buy a grain, a bread, flour, pasta, something like that, and it says fortified on it, what that actually means is the manufacturer has taken that grain and they have pumped it with vitamins to keep you from getting vitamin deficiency. So it was called the Fortification Act. And it happened about 1950 or so when they put that into place and started fortifying all of our grains. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story as to why it's important to know that and why that necessarily isn't the best way to get your vitamins. So, as I mentioned before, we don't see vitamin E deficiency as much as we used to due to the Fortification Act. So I'm going to tell you a little story about a vitamin deficiency that played into getting to this fortification in America. So, back in the early 1900s, a lot of people were having these diseases. There were various different diseases that we couldn't figure out what they were coming from, what was causing them, how were we going to get rid of them. One of those diseases was called pellagra. And it was actually a vitamin B deficiency, but at the time, no one knew what was causing it. So this disease actually caused massive amounts of really deep lesions and blisters all over the skin, all over the body. And over time, brief time, it didn't take very long, with this deficiency, it actually would cause death as well. So as you can imagine, these poor people were having massive lesions, blisters, all of these things all over their bodies. It was getting worse and worse, and eventually they would pass away from this disease. So there were some pretty smart scientists who decided that they thought these diseases were actually being caused by food or a lack of certain foods, which is pretty smart on their point because that actually ended up being the case. But they had to prove that this was real because, like today, people don't like to believe that food actually plays such a huge role in our overall health. So it was very much disputed, and these scientists weren't given a lot of backing or support in their theory. So what they decided to do was they enlisted the help of a local prison, and they asked to use a few of their inmates to do a trial to see if they could actually create this disease within people and then heal it. So what they did is the prison agreed to give them a number of inmates, and the inmates were able to decide to do it or not do it. It was kind of sold to them in the fact that they would get better accommodations, comfortable beds, 3 meals a day of food. It was going to be so much better from where they were in general population in the prison. So several men stepped up and said that they wanted to be a part of this, and it immediately started. So as soon as they got the men separated from the general population into this new housing area, They basically controlled every ounce of food that they got, and they ensured that everything that they were eating was pretty much corn based. So it was like corn mash, cornmeal. They would make corn muffins. Other kinds of grains were put in there a little bit too, but not very much. The majority of it was all corn based. And they were fed these meals as much as they wanted to eat, mind you, 3 times a day. So 3 square meals, eating all this good food, comfy bed, all that, right? They thought they were in heaven. Well, in about 3 to 4 days time of having this diet, they actually started feeling really nauseous, not feeling well, didn't have a lot of energy, and within a week, the first couple of inmates started having lesions on their body. Blisters started appearing, the lesions started appearing, and within a matter of about 2 weeks, it was full-blown for all of them. And so the scientists were so ecstatic because they had in fact created this disease that they were trying to determine what was causing it. And they were able to prove that the food that they were eating actually caused this disease, but they weren't sure why. They still hadn't been able to pin it down to an actual vitamin yet, but they knew the food had something to do with it. So these poor men were begging and pleading. They didn't know what was going on with them. They didn't know why they were so sick. They really didn't know what the test was. They weren't given any information. And they were begging and pleading to be put back in general population. They didn't want to be a part of this test anymore. And the scientists said, don't worry, we're going to fix you up. So all that they did was change the inmates' diets and started adding in fruits, vegetables, really good high quality fats, things like that, like a really good whole food diet. Again, 3 square meals a day, nothing else changed. And within about a week to 2 weeks time, they started feeling better. The lesions started healing on their own. The blisters started disappearing. And within about a matter of a month, all of it was gone. They were completely healed, no lesions, no blisters, nothing. They were completely healthy. And so the scientists were able to then say without a doubt that food was causing this illness. Again, it took some time for them to nail down that it was an actual specific vitamin, but they had figured it out. These are the types of things that happened over a period of time that led to the Fortification Act, that led to the need of having vitamins in food so that people didn't have vitamin deficiencies at that level to eradicate those diseases. And it's actually worked. But there's also a downside to that. So as we just heard, there's been great work in the early 1900s to get rid of disease and to make sure that people were getting the vitamins and minerals that they needed for their body, which is fantastic. And it was actually going really well. Well, let's say World War II happened, the Great Depression happened, famine was happening, all of these terrible things were happening, right? There was a series of a lot of different things that happened. And during that time, there was a really big push, and granted, there's still a big push for this, but specifically during that time, there was a really big push to end world hunger. We wanted to find a way to feed as many people as possible with as little product as possible at the lowest cost possible and just completely end hunger in the world. And it was a very noble cause, but it led to some other issues. So again, we had some wonderful scientists. These scientists actually ended up winning a Nobel Peace Prize for their invention that I'm going to tell you about and for their work towards ending world hunger. So again, some more wonderful scientists who are trying to figure out how they can provide mass amount of foods for the growing population of the world, and how could they do that? And so they again took to grains, specifically wheat, to try and figure that out. And they started kind of breeding and inbreeding and crossbreeding wheat grain from other areas of the world and kind of creating a new, completely different breed of wheat. And they succeeded. The wheat grew faster, it was more durable, it was shorter, so it wasn't susceptible to windstorms. It was more, it had more pesticide barriers to it, so like a certain pest wouldn't mess with it. It had all of the things they could possibly want, and all they had to do was cross seeds and breed this new plant. So they had done it. They won their Nobel Peace Prize, all these wonderful things. Started selling this wheat seed across the world to the globe so that everyone could benefit from this amazing wheat. Great, fantastic, right? Well, the problem with that is our bodies are basically a walking chemistry set. Our bodies have decided what chemical reactions it wants, what it needs, and how to do it efficiently for millennia, okay? So when we go messing with food like wheat and we take a natural growing plant and we turn it into something that's unnatural, meaning we crossbreed it into things that may never actually come into contact with each other in nature, and then we start consuming it, we actually are creating problems. So what happened is the wheat that's grown in nature is actually a 36 chromosome wheat. What was created by these fantastic scientists is a 96 chromosome wheat. So if you think about a chemistry set, that big of a change, the chemical reaction is going to be different. So not only did we have to start fortifying these grains to get vitamins and minerals in, because we were pushing more people to eat grains as the main part of their diet to end world hunger, we also were actually destroying bits of our gut microbiome and our chemical buildup because our body didn't know how to process this wheat. That's why we're seeing such a huge rise in celiac disease and gluten sensitivity. Our body doesn't know what to do with it. It's kind of like an alien wheat, right? So here we're saying, okay, here's some cheap food, eat all this grain. It should be the basis of your diet. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't have the vitamins and minerals in it that you need, so we're going to fortify it with vitamins and minerals so that you don't become deficient and ill. But also, by the way, we forgot to tell you that your body doesn't actually know what it's eating. So a lot of things were accomplished that were fantastic, but a lot of things were created that were not so fantastic. And so I've gotten really off the trail of vitamin E, but for a specific reason. So all of these things happen so that we can then have fortified grains to get in our essential vitamins that our body requires for basic cell overturn, rebuilding, life in general. We have to have these. So where can we get vitamin E from that's not from a fortified grain that could potentially cause issues in our walking chemistry set? Well, vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. And if you're eating high-fat foods like avocados and olive oil, not only are you getting vitamin E naturally, but those high-fat foods are actually helping your body to absorb that fat-soluble vitamin. Now, there's two potential ways that you could be becoming deficient in vitamin E at a lower level, not to the point of the story I told you before where you're going to have neurological issues and things like that, but we can actually have very low level deficiencies of vitamin E that won't show up on a lab report, but does show up in a lot of different ways, like our skin, our mood, our fatigue, things like that, right? It shows up. So two ways that can happen. One is that you're not eating a diet full of natural vitamin E. So what does that mean? Well, there's natural vitamin E and then there's synthetic vitamin E. Any supplement that you take that has vitamin E in it, you're actually getting a synthetic version of vitamin E. Your body can absorb it, it knows what to do with it, but at a much lower level. It doesn't get absorbed at the same level as the natural vitamin E does. So, natural vitamin E, you want to eat avocados, olives, olive oil. These are huge factors in getting vitamin E in. As a matter of fact, you can actually eat 2 Brazil nuts a day and get your daily recommended allowance of vitamin E. So lots of ways to get it in, but you notice none of those choices were grains, which we've been taught should be the basis of our diets. So herein lies the problem. Number 2, a way to be deficient in vitamin E is actually gut imbalance. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned, vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. So if your gut is imbalanced, you likely have malabsorption issues, which means the bacteria that must be present to participate in breaking down those molecules, again, the chemical reaction. So the bacteria and the enzymes that are responsible for that chemical reaction are missing, are out of balance, or are being overran by bad bacteria. However your imbalance is, it causes malabsorption. So your body can't actually absorb the fat that you're eating and get it into the cells where it needs to be. So those are the 2 ways that you can actually be becoming vitamin E deficient. So what can you do to maintain good vitamin and mineral balance? while also eating the foods that you love, the foods that you enjoy, the foods that are convenient for you, and also the foods that are healthy? Well, comment below and let me know what foods you eat that you would be sad to give up and what foods you eat that you think are very vitamin dense. Again, I'm going to say the biggest ways to get vitamin E in your body is to heal your gut, make sure that it stays balanced, make sure that you're eating a balanced diet, especially add really high quality, fantastic olive oil into your diet. It has more bioavailable vitamin E in it than any other substance on the planet. So you will get that vitamin E to the cells where you need it. It is going to help your hair, your skin. Your cells rebuild and replenish every few days, and they need certain vitamins and minerals to do that effectively and efficiently, and vitamin E is one of them. And so if you think about the things that make you age or feel terrible, it's a lot of times our cells degenerating and not regenerating in a way that we need them to. So vitamin E is so amazingly important. So again, add them. Olive oil is a great way to do that. Focus on getting those really good supplements in. If you just cannot eat those things for whatever reason, maybe you're allergic to avocados, maybe you just can't stand the taste of olives, whatever it is, olive oil is a great way to go again because you can cook with it and you don't necessarily taste the flavor if you mix it with a lot of things. I, however, adore the flavor of olive oil, so I could eat it by itself, but that's not everyone. But definitely try and get as much of that in as possible. And I cannot express enough how important gut balance is and making sure that you're not having malabsorption issues and that the vitamin E, vitamin D, the fantastic vitamins that you are working really hard to get into your diet actually make it into your body where it needs to be. And a big, huge part of that is just ensuring that your gut is healthy and balanced and in a great place. And again, if you need help with any of that, you always know where to find me, brandymilenberg.com, or leave me some messages here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about vitamins and minerals.